Christianity? Give me one evidence that Christianity is true.
I mean, it depends. It depends, like what you would take as evidence. I guess one of the things that I would point to is how the people that were around Jesus and the people that like the followers of like the movement that was created after Jesus like died or went up to heaven or whatever, you know, it was mostly like a Christian movement. And I know that Muslims would point to like the Ebionites, of people that didn't believe he was crucified, didn't believe like he was God or anything. But like, how do you explain the mass movement of Christianity after Jesus, you know, in that time?
You realize the followers, the followers of Jesus were being persecuted generally, and they were weak in the Roman Empire. The spread only happened when Constantine adopted Christianity. So that explains, that answers your question. One of the biggest empires of the time, one of the two biggest empires, adopted Christianity, and then the Christianity spread under Constantine, who had the councils, right, like Nicaea and Constantinople and all of these other councils, and due to the fact that he did that, Christianity spread. I mean, it's a very basic way to explain it. I mean, it's just history, right? But before that, there were very weak group of followers that were hiding, mostly because they were afraid.
Okay. So you're saying that Christianity didn't really spread? Are you talking about like into the 4th century? Like that was when it really hit its like spreading point?
Yeah, if you want to look at that, like the big spread of Christianity, you talk about when the Roman Empire adopted Christianity. Not necessarily the councils. You know, the adoption of Christianity was not 400 years before, right? Constantine adopted Christianity. Councils started 325, 381. Many councils were there, right? But before the Roman Empire adopts Christianity, Christians were not like that massive in number anymore. Okay,
Okay. Okay. Cool.
even Paul was killing the or attacking or fighting the followers of Christianity or the apostles of Jesus, whatever, before his changing into becoming a Christian himself. He's persecuting the followers. So it wasn't really that big of a faith. So you're asking me why is this big spread? You can see a historical development there with one of the biggest empires of the time, Christianity. You cannot see that with Islam. Islam started with Prophet Muhammad in Mecca, right? 13 years of persecution, then Medina, 10 years, and then Muslims overcoming other nations, others like Roman and Persian Empire, which were fighting against them. You never had one of the two biggest empires like the Roman or Persian Empire adopting Islam, and then Islam spread. That didn't happen. Islam spread with people learning about it, with the followers spreading the faith. So you can say that about Islam. But again, where do you see? How is that evidence still? Where is the evidence of Christianity? How is that evidence of Christianity?
Well, I mean, what comes to mind with that is like even if Christianity's big spread was when the Roman Empire adopted Christianity. Like, what about still the majority of the people from the first century that like were around Jesus and the people who were the followers of those people and like the descendants of those people, like they believed in I guess an early form of Christianity, whether you think that's the same as the post-Nicene Church. So you okay.
But the problem you'd have with that is that you cannot use that for that Christianity of today is true, because those people believe opposite to what the people today believe. In fact, if it proves anything, it proves that the beliefs today are false. Because the earliest followers then, they believed something different than what the followers later on, after the Roman Empire introduced Greek theology into Christianity. So if you want to look at it that way, then in reality, if you look at the earliest followers, they didn't believe what the Christians today believe.
Okay, what about people like Paul, who was writing in, I don't know, the 50s, 60s, 80s? Like, because I mean, obviously,
one was against. I mean, this is the whole like, kind of forms, and maybe you've seen arguments and discussions about that. But Paul was against the teachings of the apostles. He was against the teachings of Jesus. He had his own clashes with the apostles, Book of Acts, where he was teaching the Jews that they don't need to keep the law, and then he lied and he said. He pretended as if he did it. He was questioned, and we heard rumors about you that you teach people. This is an accident on a person that we heard rumors about you that you're teaching that Jewish people don't need to live under the law anymore. So go and sacrifice, show people that you're following the law. And then he went and did it. But you go to his letters, he's telling the people they don't need to follow the law. We're now justified with faith. So he was a hypocrite, right? Teaching different things. But it wasn't only Paul. There's many people writing gospels at that time. There's plenty of gospels. That were written down, and they were all competitive to each other, and everyone giving his view of what Jesus was and what Jesus did and whatever. I mean, it just so happened that Paul's message, because it was the easiest, was the one that was adopted more. Because Paul was telling people, you don't need to do anything. You got a free ticket to paradise. Imagine, look, I come to you, hey B, look, you gotta follow 613 laws. And then my friend comes and says, look, don't listen to this dude, man. Jesus came to die and take all your sins away. All you need to do now is just believe in Jesus. You can eat what you want, drink what you want, do what you want, right? None of these things there's no more of these laws, It's life easy, right? Just believe in that Jesus was a curse, became a curse for us, and he took all of the sins away, and just it's a very easy message to adopt. People can follow. But again, we're looking for evidence of Christianity, right? When we say Christianity, we're talking about evidence that Jesus was God, and there's such a thing as Trinity and all of it.
Okay. I guess what if you argue it from like a standpoint of like that the Bible and the Gospels are reliable, and they did reliably write what Jesus said, and that kind of like the obviously the lowest Christology, the Muslims like that. That wasn't only what Jesus said. It's just like the coming of the kingdom of God and stuff like that, like what you guys would take to be the Injil. But like actual the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Like, what if you say that those are reliable?
We know that they're not reliable. So why would I say that?
Well, I mean, like you. I mean, like, what if someone argued that okay, the Gospels are reliable and we
How
have
would they argue that when we how would they argue that we know the earliest written manuscripts of it is from the 4th century and we know that all of the authors are anonymous? How would they argue that?
Well, I know that I'm in college, and I just took a class where there's a kid in there who's I think he's trying to become like a Catholic priest, and he's really smart.
Okay.
And he explained it how I mean, I guess this isn't like manuscripts, but this is talking about how like the oral tradition of the Gospels was preserved, and it basically was that there was the oral tradition before the Gospels were actually written down, and there were people that were guarding the oral tradition, and when people tried to add to it, like for example, like if you have like everyone knows the alphabet, and if someone tried to add into the story or add into the alphabet, people are like, no,
You know what's funny?
like that's wrong.
I don't know who this guy is, but he's just telling you what happened in Islam and saying that happened in Christianity when he never did. I really find, I'm not gonna lie, I find that really funny because I mean the oral tradition is in Islam, the memorization of the Quran, and no, but this is the Islamic tradition. Christianity never had an oral tradition of the Gospels. Do you know why they never had an oral tradition of the Gospel? Because they were differing over the canons, anyways. I mean, they didn't until the time of Athanasius, where he canonized the 27 books are going to be the canon of the New Testament or whatever, and then you had that book becoming the Bible. We weren't even in agreement on what these Gospels are. When Luke was writing, he wasn't writing in the church where everybody's following. He was saying, in Luke 1, you can read it, he's saying that people were writing, so I thought it was also a good idea for me to write. So what oral tradition? He was just some random guy writing it somewhere, right? All of these authors were people writing random history. They were not like all accepted by the church, appointed by the church to write information. That didn't happen. So to come and say there was an oral tradition, that is like, I'm sorry, that's the biggest nonsense I've heard in my life. Plus, they wrote in different times, they wrote in different times in history. And it wasn't from the time of Jesus. There's no such thing as an oral tradition in Christianity. That's the biggest joke I've heard in my life. Sorry to say. If I ask him who is carrying the oral tradition, who appointed that oral tradition, which authority said, okay, those group of people, we're going to have those group of people are the carriers of the oral tradition. You know what, Islam, I can tell you who are the writers of the Quran. I can tell you that memorizes many of the names of the memorizers of the Quran, and then we have certificates. Every memorizer of the Quran today has a certificate that traces back to the Prophet. Right, with the name people memorize, teaching it, the person after him, going back to the Prophet. There's no such thing as an oral tradition of Christianity. I mean, and I'm saying it's really funny that this person is saying there is. Because, I mean, if even were to ask you, oral tradition of what? When you go to the Testament 66 books, or is it the Catholics oral tradition, or is it the Orthodox? Which one? Who is teaching which oral tradition? They didn't even agree on the number of the scriptures. So, these scriptures were,
I was gonna say like the major branches of Christianity, they all agree on Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and the New Testament. They disagree, with some Old Testament books, but the oral tradition is what I'm talking about. That's like the Gospels before, like from when Jesus lived, whatever Christians say he died, to when Mark was written down.
They weren't written then. Yeah, they weren't written.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like oral tradition.
So how can you have an oral tradition of the Gospels before the writing?
Because the people who were around Jesus, they saw it, and they passed these stories down, and people passed it down, and it was...
Which stories? You realize I just told you that there was multiple people writing Gospels. And I told you that Luke told you what he was doing. Many people were writing, he thought it's also a good idea for him to write. How is that an oral tradition? Plus, who gives the authority to the people to have to conduct an oral tradition? Who did that? Who gathered the people and said, okay, you guys are going to become the bearer of the oral tradition? I mean, basically, this guy just told you a fairy tale story with no proof, historical proof whatsoever.
Yeah, well, I feel, and I mean, if there's anybody in the comments that can correct me, and you can correct me too, but I feel like that is the standard Christian position, because how else would those stories get from... What is the standard Christian position then? Because I mean, I don't know how else the stories would survive that long.
The standard academic Christian position, or the standard layman who doesn't know his head from his tails position.
Sure.
If you talk about the standard academic, position, they will agree that these books are written by anonymous authors. The standard position is that there are people, they're copying from each other. We have this idea of Mark and Matthew, you have the copying happening between the two, which makes no sense because you can see verbatim copying between both of them, which makes no sense
Yeah, so not
given the
problem.
historical narrative. Yeah, and you have like this is the academic position. You had sources like M and Q and other sources which are not now lost, which are not found. That those authors were copying from. Okay, so you had main sources that they were copying from that are lost today that we do not have. This is the standard position that what we have today. The fact is that it's 400 years. The full manuscript is 400 years. The Codex Sinaiticus, and that all of the authors are anonymous. That is the academic position. I think.
Okay.
Like nobody really in academia who is worth a nickel would say anything opposite to that. It's just a fact.
Yeah. Okay. So what would you say is your position then on like because I know there's people that say like we can kind of generally. What?
Sorry to stop.
No, you're good.
What here? So I've already established that we can't say that the gospel is unreliable. But our main question was about what evidence is Christianity. Even if I were to accept this, you know, I say, okay, let me hypothetically accept the gospels are reliable. That's not evidence that Christianity is true. If someone writing a history in a book, it doesn't mean it happened. You realize that, right? Even if I were to accept the gospels, you have to prove the gospels themselves have some sort of evidence that they're from God. If you just say, okay, they're writing history, the history could have been true or false, right? The people writing history in a book, it doesn't mean Christianity is true. And then I'll add you another layer, which is that the gospels or the Bible doesn't teach what Christians today believe. So basically it's layers of falsehood upon each other, you know? So basically it's not reliable, but even if it was reliable, it doesn't prove that the information in it is true. And even if we accept it's reliable and the information in it is true, there's nothing in it that talks about the Trinity of Jesus. So I mean, how many layers of conceding do I need to do to show you that there is no such thing as evidence for Christianity?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess the only thing that I can think to say to that is if the gospels were proven reliable, and I think it would provide some evidence at least, because the rise of Christianity is what we would expect if Jesus actually said what we see in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you would expect something like the church to rise. So
I don't get that. Sorry, if Jesus said something, you expect the church to rise. I don't get that.
Yeah. Okay. For Jesus in the Gospels, he predicts his death and resurrection, right? So if Jesus actually did say that, and in the Gospels,
I don't think that's true. Actually, I don't think that's true. For instance, you're saying, I believe Jesus predicted. Jesus said he wouldn't die in the Bible. That's what I believe he said. Jesus said to them, they asked him, give us a sign. The Pharisees they asked him, give us a sign. Okay? He said to them about adulterous generation, or whatever. He insulted them. And then he said that you, the adulterous generation, you'll not get no sign except the sign of Jonah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So what was the sign of Jonah? You know what the sign of Jonah was?
Yeah, the 3 days, 3 nights in the belly of a whale. And that's
What was the sign? What's the miracle? What's the sign?
That he stayed alive.
He survived in the belly of the whale. So if Jesus said, I'm going to give you the same miracle of Jonah, I'm going to be in the belly, he was in the belly of the whale, I'm going to be in the belly of the earth 3 nights and 3 days. So if Jesus is given the sign of Jonah, can he be dead in the grave?
If he was saying that the entirety of the sign is going to be replicated by me, then
the scripture is literally adulterous generation, you shall get no sign except the sign of Jonah. Just as the same way he was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so shall be the Son of Man in the belly of the earth for 3 days. This is literally what the scripture says.
Right, yeah.
So now, I'm asking, he said, you will get the sign of Jonah, and then he says, just as he was, I'm going to do. I mean, it cannot be more clear than this, right? So he's saying, I'm going to give you the same sign of Jonah, just as he was in the belly, 3 nights and 3 days and 3 days, I'm going to be there. Now, my question is, what if the sign was that he was alive? Could it be possible for Jesus to be dead in the grave? And if Jesus is dead, let's accept this, that he's dead, which makes no sense with the scripture. It's contradicting what he's saying. But if we're saying the sign that he's dead, how is that a sign? Because he didn't say the resurrection. He just said about the part about 3 days and 3 nights in the grave. That's it. How's that miracle for anything?
I mean, it wouldn't be a resurrection because he was never dead. But if I guess what comes to mind is
Yeah, no, I'm saying he didn't say
would he-
anything about resurrection in that verse. All he said is that he's going to be in the grave for 3 days. I mean, every dead person is in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. So obviously he's going to be doing something different. It's a sign, you know. Every dead person
what
is
does he mean then?
in the grave. That's what I'm
What
saying.
does
He's
he
not
mean
going
then?
to be. He's going to be in the belly of the earth, but he's going
what
to
does that-
survive
what does that
in the
mean?
belly of the earth. That means he's going to be in the grave, but he's not. He's not going to die. I mean, surviving in the grave, being buried,
Okay.
right, but not
Okay.
dying. Because if I put you in a grave for 3 days and 3 nights, you're probably going to die, right? So he's in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights, but he's not dying. He's not going to die. He's going to be alive.
But how did he get there then? He had to have been because he was at least.
You realize I don't need to prove how he gets there, because all I need to do is to just take his words for what he's saying the science. I mean, that's irrelevant.
How would he
gets
get
there,
in the grave then? How would he get in the grave then? If it wasn't for the crucifixion?
I mean, it's very
And I'm playing.
I mean,
I'm playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, no, I don't. You realize I don't accept the biblical narrative, right? But I'm saying if the biblical narrative is true, I'm taking Jesus' words. This is what he said. Now, someone can go and ask Jesus, how did you get in the grave in the first place? I mean, okay, let's say they crucified someone else other than him, and then he went inside the grave. Whatever story it is, to hide so people don't find him after they crucified the other person. He went to hide in the grave for 3 days. I mean, you can give any random. Either he's lying or he's saying the truth, right? If he's not going to go to the grave, then he's lying. If he's lying, he cannot be God, and the whole historical narrative is come out of the way. Or he's saying the truth, and then you have a problem because he's saying the truth. Then therefore, Jesus didn't die, according to his own words.
Yeah, I see your point.
It's an internal critique of the scripture. Yeah.
Right. And I know you don't have to accept the other points, but the whole biblical narrative. And I know that people will say, "Oh, it's not in Q, the passion narrative," but there is a passion narrative in the Gospels at least. So Jesus, whether you take it to be historical or not, Jesus in the Gospels does predict that he's going to be crucified. That was the whole point of that he was going to die. So I would say
Does he say I'm going to die? Does he say I'm going to die, or does he say I'm going to be crucified? What does he say? Do you remember?
Well, maybe he says I'm going to be crucified.
Sure.
But then
let's assume he says I'm going to die. Let's assume if he says I'm going to die, then what you've done there is number one, you presented a contradiction between this verse.
Right. That's
and
what I was going to say. That's what I was going to
say. Number two, if we ignore the fact that it's a contradiction, you see what I'm doing with you right now? I'm just pretending all the problems are not there. But I'm showing you, even if all the problems are not there, you still don't have anything. I'm just showing you, basically, if I give you the entire floor to Christians, they still have no proof. If I give them the floor and the windows and the building, they have no proof still. So if I say, okay, no problem, let's ignore that there's no contradiction, he's actually said he's going to die. How does that prove Christianity?
Are you granting the Gospels, like all the Gospels, or just granting that he said he's going to die?
No, let's say he said he's going to die and resurrect. Where can you prove that he actually resurrected and died? Where can you prove that? If he died, how can you prove he resurrected? Where is the proof that you can give me that this happened?
I mean, I guess the thing about history is that you can't really, especially something that happened that long ago, you can only really say with I guess you can't say proof, but I guess you can say, like, the thing about history is it's about
what's the difference between that B and if I told you Prophet Muhammad he was there was an army of Muslims and they needed water, and then the water started they didn't have enough water, and then the water started gushing out between the fingers of Prophet Muhammad. That's more historically reliable than the Gospels can ever be, because we know who reported it. Okay, and we have the chain of narration of the people reporting it, and we have a mass transmission. So you have different people from different regions, from different places reporting the same incident. So we have this, which is more historical than any event in history. If I told you that, then therefore this is Prophet Muhammad, you're not going to accept that. Now you're bringing me something which is No written by anonymous authors, no proof for it whatsoever, and you're telling me to accept it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I'm glad that you actually pivoted to I don't know if that's Sirah or Hadith, but
It's a hadith.
if you
Yeah.
okay, cool. So that's one of the, if you're fine with moving on, that was like the main reason why I came on here today was
I'm fine
yeah,
with moving on, but all I
yeah,
just wanted to do is, because you said you're in between which one is true, Christianity or Islam, is to
yeah,
demonstrate to you that Christianity has nothing, no ground. I mean, this question I didn't ask you alone, right? I ask every Christian. Nobody is ever able to give me anything of substance. I mean, when you ask Muslims, they give you proof. When you ask Christians, they're just like, it's always the same thing. It's either they're going to talk about their personal experience, how they were a criminal, murderers, whatever, and Jesus came to them in their dream, which I mean doesn't prove anything. They all come with the same story, or they're going to tell you something which is not. That's it. They're going to tell you Jesus prophesies in the Old Testament. You go to the Old Testament, you don't find a single prophecy correct about Jesus, right? So that's they're going to give you something like that. But other than that, you have nothing.
okay, yeah, I see your point.
Now, yeah, you said you want to move on. I'm sorry, you want to say something that you're moving on now to Islam or something. I think you had something in mind. Go ahead.
Yeah. So so I actually talked to Libiano, I don't know how long ago, maybe a month ago ish. He recommended me two books. It's 101 Fulfilled Islamic Prophecies, and then it's Abraham Fulfilled. So I'm reading those two books, and I just finished this one today. And I think what really stands out to me is, and I would say this is probably one of the biggest or the biggest reason why I don't believe in Islam, is because in my mind, Muhammad's prophethood needs to be established, right? And I know that you guys would cite prophecies as, a big reason why, a big evidence and proof that he is a true messenger of God, right? So after finishing this, I came to the conclusion that I will say this: there is some prophecies in there that are vague, but there also is prophecies in there that obviously nobody, unless they're receiving revelation from God, could know. And there's plenty of those in there. So I think what comes to my mind is there's two scenarios here. Either he is a true prophet, or, and I don't know if this is a conspiracy theory. You probably heard this before, but there's a way that people attributed hadith after the fact to him and fabricated isnads, like the chain of narration. They fabricated it and they kind of back projected it on Muhammad and said that he said these things when he didn't.
Sure. Okay, so let's agree. If this is not the case, that the people have back projected information about him, therefore it must be the fact that Prophet Muhammad is a messenger of God. Do you disagree with that?
Yeah, it has to be.
Okay, perfect. Then we will be on the same page then that Prophet Muhammad is a messenger of God. I'll tell you the reasons are very simple. Now, first, with the hadith already, like I told you, we have an established oral tradition with the hadith. We have chains of narrations, biographies of the people in the chains of narrations, right? We have all of that present that anyone can critique today, right? We have books of what we call ilm al-rijal, the science of men and the people in the chain and all of that. We have all of these books, right, written. We have them written by very early on generations of Islam that talk about those individuals and talk about the chains and all of that. Now, not only that, we have these hadith and narrations, many of which we've seen the prophecies that are happening today, many of which happened hundreds of years after the prophet, right? So, now we have already carbonations of these ahadith from the 1st century, 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century. So it's impossible, and it's multiple books now we're talking. Now, these ahadith were already there in the 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century, and the people who read them, and they haven't happened yet. So for them, these were prophecies, but they still haven't happened. For us, the prophecies that happened. But if someone was changing something, then he would have taken out all of these because they haven't happened yet. He would have removed all of these. So all of this 1,000 year of generation of people before the prophecy happened had all of these books already carbon dated and written. We have thousands, literally, of books quoting these ahadith, right? It's impossible, but it's impossible to say that these books were not there before, because we have books of jurisprudence, books of exegesis, books of hadith, books of all of Sirah, the biography of the Prophet. All of these books are quoting this ahadith. right? And now we're talking about books. We're talking about thousands upon thousands of books written throughout history. All of them are quoting this hadith, and they haven't yet happened. And today they happen, yes. But we have all of these classical books that have the hadith before the events happened. You know, Hammam ibn Munabbih, he was what we call a tabi'i. A tabi'i is someone who met a companion of the Prophet ﷺ and he didn't meet the Prophet. Yeah. So Hammam ibn Munabbih was the direct student of Abu Huraira, which was the biggest narrator of hadith, right? The person who narrated most amount of hadith was Abu Huraira. His student was Hammam ibn Munabbih, and we have his Sahifa. We have carbon dated his hadith that he wrote. We have it today, carbon dated. Okay. We have the Muwatta of Ibn Malik. Now we're talking about 1st, 2nd century. You have the Muwatta of Ibn Malik. We have Muslim of Imam Ahmad. We have many, basically. The list goes on and on, right? And they all have prophecies, which are happen today, like I told you, and happened 500 years ago, 600 years ago, 700 years ago. So it's impossible to say that they wrote it after the event, because we can clearly historically establish that this was the case.
Okay. Yeah. No. I know that there is like even in this book it said that there is some prophecies that like haven't yet came true, but obviously that doesn't disprove them. You know, because it's not a contradiction, right?
Yes.
But like for example, there is. I wish I like wrote down a hadith that I could have brought up here. But for example, like there's let me just
like for the river Euphrates, for example, there's a hadith that it will dry up, and then the gold will be found under it, and people will fight over it. Right now, we know right now that they're telling us that it's going to dry up by 2060 or something, or 20. Right. It's already started drying up. Yeah, but this haven't happened yet, because the full hadith haven't happened. But we can even say it's starting to happen right now.
Yeah. Wouldn't people say that that's prophesied in the Bible too? That's just a question.
I haven't seen that. I'm not sure.
You haven't?
Could be. Okay. But I don't think the exact same prophecy is there. I mean, even if you mention something, I don't think the exact same prophecy is there. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I guess just I have so one of the prophecies in here, and this is just an example off the top of my head. So Muhammad, I think he was coming. He was coming back to Mecca, I think, or he was coming back to Medina or somewhere, and he was with one of his companions, and they were the person that narrated this hadith. For example, there was like a big gust of wind, and then I think someone asked him like, what does that mean or something, and then he said like a hypocrite has died. Like that was what that big gust of wind was. And then when they got back, when they actually got to the town they were going to, let's just say it was Medina, they were told, oh, this hypocrite, like this so-and-so, they died. So it was like, that just seems to me like that can be, and this is
I never use this as a prophecy in my life.
Okay. Yeah, because I feel like
my criteria. Yeah. Look, I have not recommended these books to anyone personally. My criteria is to give people the prophecies. I usually give them the prophecies myself.
And this probably has the ones you're going to talk about.
Yeah, but yeah, you can basically ignore these ones that you think are vague. But then they can be supportive evidence when you look at the amount of ones that are clear.
True.
You understand what I'm saying? I'll give an example. Like there's a prophecy about Prophet Muhammad and in the Battle of Badr. It's a very, very strong prophecy, for instance. The Battle of Badr, which is the first battle of Islam. See, Muslims 300 against 1,000, right? Where Umar ibn Khattab, second caliph of Islam, where he said that the Prophet ﷺ told him exactly where the disbelievers are going to die. He walked with them for the battle, and the Prophet put his hand and he said, X, disbeliever X is going to die here. This believer Z is going to die here. This believer this is going to die here. Now I want you to think about how the impossibility of this happening.
Yeah, of course it's impossible.
Yeah, so he's not only saying where the disbelievers are going to die, he's naming who is going to die where. Before a battle is about to start, between 300 people and 1,000 people. I'm just giving you an example, right? Now we have prophecies in the Quran, for instance, about the Romans and Persians. I'm sure you've probably seen that prophecy, probably is in the book. It's a prophecy that is time bound. There's a prophecy about Surah ibn Malik, him wearing the bracelets of the Persian king. I'm not sure if you've seen that prophecy or not. Maybe it's in the book, maybe it's not in the book. I haven't read the book myself. But there was a bounty hunter that was trying to kill the Prophet ﷺ, and he was given the prophecy, he's going to wear the bracelets of the Persian king. He was a disbeliever at the time, coming to kill the prophet, a bounty hunter. And he told him specifically is going to wear the bracelets of the strongest man on earth, basically, the leader of the Persian Empire. And the prophet, this man became Muslim, fought with Muslims. He could have died in any battle. He could have died of disease. Muslims overcame the Persian Empire, which is another insanity, because the prophet that time was leaving Mecca because they were plotting to kill him. He had no followers, nothing. When he said to that person, he had barely weak followers, When he's saying to that person, you're going to wear the bracelets of the Persian king. And then he survived until the time of Umar. The prophet died, the first caliphate died, the second caliphate. And then he was given the bracelets to wear with his own hands. There's many multiple prophets that we talk about today, like Prophet I'm talking about the diseases widespreading, and sexual immorality widespreading, and then new sexual transmitting diseases coming, new diseases that didn't exist in the ancestors of the people will come to Advent.
Yeah.
The prophet talked about. Yeah, you want to say something before I give other prophecies? Yes. What do you want to say?
Yeah. Yeah. So, what I was going to say to that one is, how do we know? Because I know that people will say, I watched a video on Fareed Responds' YouTube, and he was talking about the Romans have fallen, and something about the Persians being defeated, and was it the Romans were going to defeat the Persians?
Yes.
So he was talking about how people were literally like, I think he said they were like placing bets or something, like they were like Muhammad, if this doesn't come true, you're a false prophet. So that one I have no answer to, but but the ones where you say like this disbeliever is going to die right here, or the one about the bracelet or whatever, how do we know that those weren't just written down after it happened and then they just said, oh, Muhammad said this?
Yeah, because this is what I'm saying about the hadith being mass transmitted by multiple people. So the Prophet ﷺ fought in the Battle of Badr with multiple people, right? You have multiple people eyewitnessing that and narrating it. Now, those people fought with the Prophet and to lose their life, right, in this battle, to survive, to later on for Islam to be what it is. If it's not true what the Prophet is actually saying, that they'll have no reason to say that. Have no reason to follow a liar, right? Have no reason to follow with my life and go into the battlefield and die and fight for a life. But that's why I'm telling you, if you want to even exclude or ignore a specific prophecy like that, for whichever reason you want, but as I'm saying, it's not rational, because those people actually follow the Prophet, and then you have multiple people repeating it, and then we have multiple instances of people calling other people a liar, because there were people lying about that hadith. There's a guy that wrote a whole book about benefits of reciting the Quran, and then he was exposed as a liar, like, oh, this surah has this benefit. He just made them up. But in Islam, we don't accept nonsense, right? If the Prophet didn't say it, we're not going to come up and tell us like reading this surah is going to give you this reward. Where did you get? He literally made it up, for each surah, read this and you will get 100 houses in paradise. Like some nonsense, like he just wrote it with his own self, right? So in Islam, we have many instances of people being confronted. Whether you say it in basically in a positive sense for Islam or a negative sense, we don't care. If you're lying, you're lying. But like I said, we have now plenty of prophecies that are happening hundreds of years after the Prophet and today. And I was giving you examples of these ones, right now, what I'm telling you. Because nobody can make any argument when I'm giving you prophecies that was hundreds of years later. And we know for a fact that nobody can argue that this is the case that they're happening. Prophet talks about interest widespreading, for instance. And interest becoming a global thing. The Prophet said even believers, well, because we believe it's not allowed. Even if we try to avoid it, we'll still be influenced by it. The dust will hit us. We'll be influenced by it. Today it doesn't matter. There's a bank system everywhere. You cannot escape interest in some form, right? So, but why this prophecy is so great? Because it's impossible without another thing happening in history, which is paper currency. You know why?
Because there's no value within itself.
No, because you cannot have interest on a global scale until you lend people. This is how interest works. You lend people and you get more money back, right? How can you lend people globally when you don't have enough gold? There is a limited reserve of gold. You don't have an infinite, unlimited amount. But if you print paper, so no worries. Then we're on the same page. So if you print paper, you can do it whatever you want, right? So that's why. So the Prophet is prophesizing another thing here in this case. The Prophet, for instance, says that time will come close, will come together. يتقارب الزمان, meaning that time will feel so quick But at the same time, you have things like distance travel. You know, right at that time, you'll spend a month to travel from one place to another. Now it's 2 hours. You can go from one country to another. No? And the Prophet talked about marketplaces coming together. Globalization, essentially. Marketplaces will come together. You know, they will come close. They will come close and come together. Because when he says تتقارب there, it means two things. Coming together. So now all of the marketplaces are on this phone. You know, I just go here and everything in the market I can purchase. But so they're coming together, but they're also coming close because they're all on my phone. I can literally open my phone and go I want. So I mean, like I'm saying, the Prophet ﷺ, for instance, talked about the deserts of Arabia, and he said you would see the deserts of Arabia coming back to being green.
Yeah.
Meadows and rivers. You know, today you go to nature, the greening of the deserts of Arabia, and they show you how there was 10,000 Asian lakes. There was fossils animals like whales and whatever that live basically in abundance of water. And they say 5,000 years ago it was all water. How would the Prophet know that? And then it says it will come back. NASA has an article called The Greening of Saudi Arabia, and it shows you how it's turning green. You just type Google right now, the greening of Saudi Arabia. They will show you 1987 or whatever until today, and like it's yellow to green. Now I can go on and on, right? And can give you things. It's impossible because look, all of these processes are in different fields. You know, one prophecy about geology and the earth was happening. One prophecy about economy. One prophecy about armies fighting each other. Like you can be an expert in something and predict something, but you cannot know everything. You know, you cannot know everything. You cannot get everything right at one point. It's impossible.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So if this is true, then you'd have no other option. No, basically, you have no other rational explanation except to say that Muhammad is a messenger of God. But you know what's even more interesting? You know what's even more interesting?
Yeah.
It's not that's not the only evidence. That's not the only evidence in Islam. Like, even though this is enough, but it's not the only evidence for Islam. You realize that the Quran also talks about, for instance, the biological life. You know, I think you're in the backstage. You're also talking a bit about embryology,
I was listening.
Right? Quran talks about description. Yeah, the Quran talks about that description from biology. Quran talks about mountains and how they have